Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and I have a guest today who is coming back to my channel, Laura Nelkin. Welcome.
Thank you.
So last time you were on my channel, we talked about Need for Food Marathon, and I really enjoyed it this year. So it was another designer from Boston area reached out to me and said, why won't we do it together? And then we reached out to a local yarn store, and there was this whole party going on, and people were having best time, and we were listening to you on the Zoom. So it was like really amazing, and like really felt like a community building event. And the fact that you raised crazy amount of money doing these things,
Crazy.
I mean, just like an icing on top of the cake.
Yeah, really like absolutely thrilled with how that project worked out this year. And it's my favorite time of the year. It's also a very intense time of the year. And I get to the day after and I see all these meetups and I'm at home on Zoom like for 12 hours that day and I see like where you were and I was like, that looks like a lot of fun. Like I feel like a little FOMO.
Well, let's talk about how it all started though. Before you begin like all these community building things, tell me like your growing up story. When and how did you grow up, and like what part of your life was crafting?
So I grew up outside of New York City in Westchester County in suburbia, and I was like always a maker from a very young age. My mom was super supportive and had like a big craft cabinet for me and kept me supplies with things to make. I had like a little Singer featherweight sewing machine that I was, welcome to take out and go to town on. There weren't a lot of rules around that. Um, Kind of interestingly, and I didn't get to know her because she passed away when I was 5, but my dad's mom was a milliner in New York City and had like a whole hat line. And if you go to Etsy and you search Nelkin, my stuff will come up, but also my grandma's hats will come up, which is really cool to see her work. And people have sent me them over the years, and family members who kind of have them in stash send them to me. So I have this bit of like making in my blood from her, but she passed away when I was quite young before I learned how to knit, obviously, but she's the one who would have taught me how to knit had she been around to do that. And her aesthetic was really interesting, and she used a lot of beads, which I love. Like we have that in common with each other. So I know when I was about like 9 or 10, I started making these woven barrettes that people made with like ribbon, and there's like a hole in the middle of the barrette, and you weave the ribbon in and you tie beads on the end. And I would sell them at my mom's beauty parlor. She was like that style of lady who went every Saturday morning for the standing appointment, and she'd bring barrettes with her every Saturday morning and like restock them, and everybody would buy them for their kids. And then she would give me the money I earned, but she would subtract the money for the supplies that she needed to go buy me more ribbon. So she kind of taught me from a very young age that like supply cost
Right.
versus profit. And I certainly wasn't counting my hourly wage at that time. And then when I hit my teen years, I started doing a lot of beadwork, a lot of seed beadwork. And also, one of my friend's moms was from Sweden and she had a loom she wasn't using. And so she gifted me a floor loom that was like a small counterbalance floor loom, a 4 harness floor loom. And so I taught myself how to weave. I mean, that was all like pre-internet. I had no YouTube. So I had books, and then I would like go find a woman who had looms in her basement who would be willing to kind of explain how to warp a loom to me, and that was like in my teen years. So I did a lot of weaving. I did a little bit of sewing, not a lot of sewing, and a lot of beading. And I'm going fast. It's fast through this. And then I ended up finding out that Cornell had gifted all of its floor looms. They used to have a big weaving program in their human ecology department, which was home economics back in the day. They had gifted them to the local community college in Ithaca. And I had been going to school in New York City at Parsons New School for Design. And I liked it, but I didn't like the city. I'm not a city girl at heart. And so I found out I could come to Ithaca and like take some classes at TC3 and work on these looms. And then my dad triple dog dared me to apply to Cornell because he kind of knew like there was a little more, and he had to like kind of dare me to do it. And so I applied and got accepted into the apparel design program.
So like
And
a
then
lot of people tell me, like when I'm asking them about design and how they grade and all these things, they're like, well, there's no school for that. You are the living proof that there is school for that.
there is school for that, and it's hard. It's so hard. It makes me whine when I think about those classes. So I ended up going to school for apparel design, and sewing was probably like the most challenging thing for me of all the skills that I had. Like I was already doing natural dyeing, and I was indigo dyeing, and I was weaving. And my mom remembers these phone calls where I call her crying, not being able to set in a zipper, and then being like, I'm not going to get an A because my gingham is wonky on my set in zipper. And they made us sew everything with gingham so that you could like see if things were hanging straight, and you could see if a zipper was laid perfectly right away, like no doubt about it. And I made it through, and now I can sew. And I did some grading classes actually at Virginia Tech. So there was some stuff that Cornell didn't have that I wanted to study. So I would go and take like multi-week classes. I ended up doing a few things at Syracuse University because they had some computer aided looms, and I wanted to play on those. I loved college. I had a great time,
I
but
mean, it sounds amazing.
yeah, it was so fun. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Cornell actually now has these Japanese knitting machines. I think they're called Seiki knitting machines. And they're the same ones that they have like at Jameson's and Shetland to like, make those gorgeous Shetland sweaters. And I have this little dream that they'll do some kind of like alumni 3-week summer thing for people like me who want to like get some continuing education.
Yeah, that would be totally awesome, right?
Yeah, totally awesome. And still sleep in my own bed, which is my favorite bed,
Well, all this time though, you were weaving, you were beading, you were sewing, you were designing, but not knitting. You didn't like knitting at that time?
I tried
Have you
to knit when I was in college. Like I was knitting on like 16 harness weaving on 16 harness CompuDobby looms and like dyeing my own warps. And I tried to knit from a book, and it didn't make sense. Like it just wouldn't let me. I couldn't do it. So I gave up because clearly my hands were busy. And then somewhere in there, I met my husband and had a kid, like as happens. I worked in the apparel industry for a while. And when I had my daughter, all of a sudden it got really hard to be at the dye pots, and it got really hard to be at the loom because like your job is for them not to die. Like they're not supposed to hit their heads on your watch. So finding time to work was really challenging for me, and I was frustrated. And then one of my daughter's friends' moms asked me if I wanted to learn how to knit one day at a play date. And I did.
Did it click? Like, was it easy somehow?
Like that. And I could take it anywhere. It was like I found my freedom again, and I found my creativity. She learned how to knit from a woman from Norway, and she was from Saskatoon. So that's why I hold my yarn in my left hand, because like she learned how to knit from her neighbor who held her yarn in her left hand. And Chelsea was totally a fearless knitter. So anything I wanted to do, she just didn't say no. I could just ask her questions, and I quickly learned how to find answers to things. And within, I'd say 2 years of learning how to knit, I found a yarn company that was about 6 miles from me on back roads, one of the first hand-dyed yarn companies. So I ended up working over there for 5 years. I was their design director.
And when easy for you to design, because like you learn how to design in school, but is it easy to translate that into the knitting world?
Oh, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, kind of like the concepts were the same. And I understand that like knits behave different than wovens, but the first time when I was like learning how to, sorry, I'm just a futzer, so I'll just be futzing constantly. The first time when I was learning how to write a pattern, clueless, just completely clueless. And what I realized is you can look at other patterns to be like, oh, that's the structure of a pattern. That would be like how you would think about sizing, but I understood how a body is shaped. But I basically was like, sure, I can do that. And then I learned how to do it.
There are people who wanted to perfect what they do, right? To learn every detail before they commit to something, before they say, I'm a designer, I'm an instructor, I'm a teacher, I can show you how to do it, right? Like they're perfection. And I'm a little bit more in that line of the spectrum, right? Like there's this imposter syndrome. And then there are people like you who like, I'll commit first and then I'll learn how to do it later.
Right. Right. And whether that's like an overinflated sense of something, or just like I'm willing to try. Like I don't mind throwing some pasta on the wall and having, like, I never know what's going to stick. Really, right? Like I'll try knit for food as an example of something where I was like, here, I have this idea. Maybe 5 people will want to do it with me, and maybe it will grow or not. Um, but that's kind of how I approach things. And I get a little antsy and bored. So I want to try something new. And the worst case is it won't resonate, and then we'll move on. And the best cases will like go down that rabbit hole for a while and explore whatever the thing is that I'm into.
Well, I'm looking at all the rabbit holes that you are falling in, like on Instagram, just like glimpses of you here. And I mean everywhere, right? You do retreats, you do teaching, you do all these kits and patterns that you sell. And then you do community building events. And then, like, I mean, I just to watch you is head spinning. How did you manage it all?
I'm not bored. Yeah, I mean, there I don't mean it to sound like I don't have a plan. Like there are spreadsheets and I'm pretty organized. And what I've quickly found early on is if I have some kind of like overarching schedule to things, which is part of why traveling to teach and having those trips and having clubs where I know I have deadlines, like if a club shipment is supposed to release one day, that means photography is 3 weeks before, that means patterns to tech editor 2 weeks before that. I've built in a structure to my year, but then within that, I always leave room for magic. Like I always leave room for me being like, ooh, I want to do this, and not being like, so I don't make decisions so early that I can't change my mind, right? Because that's what designing looks like sometimes.
Well, you mentioned how you were like making money from early age and like calculating how much is the cost of it and how much is the profit on it. Um, does working now sort of kills that magic of just being a knitter that you discovered with that mom of your friend of the baby?
Yeah. I mean, knitting, like I just always love it. Yesterday I went to yoga, and what getting to yoga looks like for me is racing out of the house at the last possible moment. I just like leave my yoga mat in the car because that's one too many things to remember. And for some reason yesterday I was like, I'm bringing my knitting, because I had like not knit a stitch all day, and I love what I'm working on right now. And so I grabbed it, and I was like the last person into class, like threw my mat down, slapped my knitting down, and I completely got called out by the whole room for like having my knitting there. I was like, well, I mean, you never know. I haven't knit all day. Like I like it as much as I like my yoga,
Is it hard to like, what's your day look like? Like how much do you plan?
That's a great question. So I wake up right around like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Unfortunately, like I'm a night bird, and I do get up in the morning. I try to hike most mornings, or some mornings, a few mornings of the week, because I just love getting outside and getting fresh air right away. And then I'll kind of do my kind of check in on Ravelry, Facebook, email, clean up for the day. And then I don't have any here, but I'm like a post-it note list maker. I love to cross things off. I love to crumple them up. I love to rewrite them. So I'll have those. And typically the day before in the afternoon, I will have kind of made a list of like what needs to get done today or in the next few days. And I'll attack that. And there's always Etsy shipping or yarn ordering. I've written down what needs to get done for that day. And during the day, I believe really strongly in, if I'm available, helping people really quickly if they have a question or a problem. So if somebody posts in my Ravelry group that they have a question about something and I'm around, I will quickly answer them. So I kind of always have that open on my desktop when I'm at my computer to help people. And same with Facebook. I find it's easier if I can help people faster. And I find that if I do that, then they can help each other. Like the next person who has that question, I've already taken care of it. So I
mean,
keep
that's like blows my mind, because like every time I text you, like there's an immediate answer.
Yeah. I like to clean stuff up real quick. I don't like if it piles up, it's overwhelming for me. I actually find it faster to just get out of the way. I do sometimes like leave my phone in the other room. So that'll be my technique when I'm like, if I'm pattern writing, and that is the hardest, I would say, headspace to find, is when I'm tech editing and grading and pattern writing. I need to create a bit of a black box and know that I have hours where nobody is going to interrupt me. And that's the hardest time to find, is like where I'm in the mood and nobody's working at my house helping me build kits, because it just needs to be quiet. You know, my husband knows if I go like this to like just not even
just not turn even around and leave.
Just turn around.
Well, what made you decide to go from corporate job, right, where there is certain predictability and certain stability, and you don't have to constantly hustle? Like if something goes wrong, it's not entirely your responsibility.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
What made you decide to go solo?
So I had worked in the apparel industry for a little while, and then I took a break to raise my daughter. And then when I worked at Schaefer, it was part-time for 5 years, and I was kind of doing my own thing and working for them. And I kind of got to the point where I was either going to like buy the company and become a yarn dyer or go off on my own. And I'm so glad I decided not to be a yarn dyer, because that is a whole other world of, I know it's fun, but a lot of stress and a lot of stock. And, you know, next level, I love supporting yarn dyers. So I order from yarn dyers all the time, and I'm happy not to be doing it. But it was really just time to make that leap into something more like that. I had kind of maxed out what I could do for Schaefer and what Schaefer could do for me at that point. So it was just time for a shift. And my girl is over. I had more time, or not over, she was older. So I had more time. She's done.
Done with her. She was 5 and independent.
Yeah, totally.
But when I'm, like oftentimes when I talk to designers, and I talk to a lot of designers, their concern is that in order for the pattern to be popular and in order to sell the pattern, you have to give something like super simple. And then there is you who like put 7,000 beads into one project. Tell me about that. Tell me, like, what was when you first decided to publish patterns with beads, like what was the reception of it? How did you build your audience? How did you build that fan base?
So I started working with beads when I was at Schaefer, actually. And I would say in a year, I would say like 66% of what I release has beads on it. I certainly also knit without beads as well. But I found that it really resonated with people because it gave me a niche that was like unique to me. Not that other people design with beads and do absolutely beautiful work, but particularly knitted jewelry with beads kind of quickly became the thing that I do. And sometimes I'll design something that absolutely should not have beads on it. And somebody will be like, where are the beads? Like looking for them on an Aran White sweater. And like, no, not on this. And I will say that I do try to dial it back and do some simple things within the year. So I kind of have a big picture, like this many sweaters, this many cowls, I don't want to go too heavy into any one thing. But I will look at like, what's going to be that kind of knit where you can pick it up and put it down and not have to think about it, not need to be in a black box when you're knitting it. Like you can be chatting with people. You don't need to be like so hyper focused, like your gorgeous brioche piece behind you, right? Like that was one that uses your whole brain. And then I love to have those pieces where you're just like so sunk into it. Like Shetland lace is that for me, something where your whole mind is like so into every stitch that like the world becomes quiet.
Right.
And it's just like you and your knitting. So I love both those styles of knitting. And I try to make sure that I'm creating both of them for people because I think it's important to have that balance. And lately, like with one of my clubs, Lola's Choice, I've been offering versions. Like I'll have the kind of like more chillaxing, easier, like you'll just flow into it kind of knitting. And then something that is a little bit more challenging for somebody who might get bored by the other style.
Well, how did the whole idea of clubs come to fruition?
So I distinctly remember it. I was selling kits wholesale, like doing knit jewelry kits wholesale, and it was going well, but it was Wholesale is it's great and it's awesome to support local yarn stores, but you're also making like half as much money, but it's the same amount of labor. And it wasn't scaling up to a point where it was making sense for the amount of energy that was going into it. And Ann Hansen and Cookie A, who's a sock designer who isn't designing as much right now, they were both going to a retreat with Clara Parks, and they came to my house for a few days to like go hiking and eat and chat. And they both had clubs. Like Ann had a club that had just gotten going. Cookie had one that was going for a while. And they were clearly, it was working for them, that model. And they were incredibly generous with like how they structured things and what worked for them or not. And it was after that weekend with them that I was like, okay, I think that is a direction that makes sense for me. And one of the ways clubs works well is if you have a community that's pretty well fostered, where people are connected with each other and you. So I'm lucky to have built a really lovely just collection of knitters I call friends. And we all, we're kind of all in it together, and it's fun. We know a lot about each other's lives, and the clubs have just kind of fed into continuing that connection.
And when we talk about clubs, I just want to show one of the kits that you sent me. So the people would receive like monthly, or is it by month?
So that club, Lola's Choice, is every other month. It's bi-monthly. And that was last, I think, May or July's kit. Yeah. And then I'm wearing a version of May from this year's kit, Chillo, which I sent you. And this is coming out after the reveal has already happened. So it's totally safe to talk about that. And that necklace has 2 different versions to it. And I'll end up doing this one in other colors because it's such a fun knit that I have a feeling people are going to be like, but I want a red one to go with that sweater or whatever. I mean, I know I do. So yes. That's what I kind of go for.
Tell me about community building, because it's like, it also takes a lot of time. It also takes a lot of you and your energy and being open about like your life, because they want to, like, I feel like even if I just watch you for a little bit, I already heard about your daughter, about your husband, and what a brilliant supporter he is, and how he writes the website for you, and how he helps in a lot of things. How much of yourself do you open to public, and how much do you feel like you're investing into this building of a community?
It's a good question. It's always a balance. I think I've learned with my family support, like what is for sharing and what is for not sharing, right? I'm a bit of an open book. And I think that's part of why I connect with people, because it's not easy for me to be, I'm not private by nature. I've learned to have a filter. Like not everything's for sharing. Every once in a while, I'll share a picture of my studio, which I'm not sure. It's crazy. There's cardboard everywhere. It is not a pretty space. There's work is happening in there. There's like whatever's in the moment going on. It's not like Instagrammable in that way, right? There's certain aspects like of my house where I will or won't take photos because that's can be private, right? Like it's the inside of our space. So this where I am right now is actually my daughter's bedroom, but she moved out. So we have like kind of a video studio in the corner of her bedroom, and we took over, and there's just enough room for her to like get into the bed when she comes home.
It's turned into mom's.
Yeah.
You can't come in.
You can't. It's just like not, it's not comfortable for staying for a very long time.
Well, she was also like a big part of your business. She was helping you with the kids, right?
Yeah. She was like my first amazing kit builder. And I recently have had someone helping me out for the last 2 years. She's going to college, and she just got a full-time job, which is very sad. But she was like kind of the first person I found that was like Bella in terms of like being able to just wind yarn really fast and be really, really like not waste any time, which is key for kit building. So yeah, I've my girl actually, while she's in grad school right now, has been working for Plied Yarn Company in Baltimore because she knows how to play with yarn. So they were psyched. Like she's been dyeing yarn and winding yarn for Anne and Beth in Baltimore. So it's like a skill she can take with her anywhere.
Is she a knitter?
No, she does really cool embroidery. Like that's her thing, is like painting with embroidery floss. So kind of different than what I do.
Oh, that's so cool. So tell me a little bit more about the kits, like what's included in the, like if people want to subscribe to your club, what would they receive?
So in kits, it kind of depends on the kit, but for the most part, a club kit will have yarn, it will have beads if it has any beads, it will have any special notion if there's some kind of like stitch saver or something that's really important for using in the design. There will be a redeem code for the pattern. And then not all patterns, but a lot of patterns have an exclusive video tutorial that is pretty like in-depth and will support you through every step, because I found that having strong video support is like, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth like 1,000,000 words, right? So oftentimes if somebody emails me with a question, I can just be like, did you watch this point in the video? And I'll give them the timestamp to watch. We timestamp all the videos now, so you can like jump around. And if you're not in the mood to like hear the story and have, you know, like some people really want to like, they want the back, they want like, you know, me just chatting away a little bit. And some people just like want the goods. So we timestamp the goods, so the people who don't want the chatter can just like jump ahead technique to technique. And then I fill in with the rest of it. So that'll be in a kit, is kind of everything that you need to do it. Some of my patterns that are kitted, there'll just be like little small technique videos. If there's just like, I need to show you a cast on or how to place a bead, there's no reason to make a big chunky tutorial. And then I do lives once a month where I'll kind of like talk about whatever I'm designing at the moment or working on, for people to kind of get a glimpse into what's going on in my mind. And then I'll talk about like what I'm reading and eating and watching, and just kind of like what's getting me excited or what's amusing me. And those seem to be like once monthly that I do that.
Tell me about the teaching. Like, how did you decide to start teaching? Do you remember like first classes? How did it all start?
I do. So I started teaching when I worked at Schaefer, and it was kind of like an integral part of that job as a design director. Like your job as a design director is to sell yarn, right? Like help a company get the company name out there. And so a lot of stores were wanting to teach our patterns. So I kind of started being like an emissary for the yarn company, and I would go and like teach a class. And I remember one of the first classes I taught was my pattern Undulating Waves. And it was a pattern that had about like 1,200 beads on it. And I was still learning about writing and designing. So like I told everybody to string on their beads, which basically took the whole 3 hours. You know, and I remember, I think I got paid $80 for that class, for that like 2-3 hour classes. And I went and like bought a pair of shoes next door, because there was like a shoe store right next door or something. But I quickly, from that, started learning like what was successful and what wasn't. And I found it to be really fun. And I certainly started small with smaller groups of students, and then started kind of building up bigger and bigger. And I was getting asked to teach at bigger events. And something that I was doing for a while there when I had a new class is I would workshop it locally small. I would like reach out to a local yarn store or somewhere and be like, hey, I have a new class. Can we list it? And I'll come teach it like 8 people tops, 5 people tops. I just want to like make sure the flow works, make sure I have content. Everybody should know I'm trialing it.
That's actually like a very smart idea. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a fun way of kind of like just workshopping it in general and getting like my mind around like, how is this going to flow? And things have changed with COVID. Like now we teach with tech. Like I never used to teach with an overhead camera. Now it's really great because I don't have to like actually touch people's hands as much. I can just like keep showing under a camera and then like walk around and look. But I have found over the last 2 years that I do not like teaching at big events. I really, really love teaching at retreats. Like that's my favorite thing. Right. And so I'm lucky enough to just basically seek out those opportunities and say yes to those. But not interested at teaching in super large things where I'm teaching 6 to 9 hours a day. And then I'm just like exhausted and trying to find food and like getting an elevator back to my room to do it all over again. I really, if I'm going to leave my house, I want to connect with people and like feel like we're sitting around in our pajamas and like chatting and knitting together at the end of the night. And I always learn as much as I'm teaching at events like that. So
Well,
Now,
what did people teach you? Like, what do you learn from
oh,
your?
sometimes like we'll go deep into the slip knit, right? Like that's the classic one. Or like, what's your favorite cast on? And someone will have this crazy like under their arm and the yarn's doing some crazy thing. And I'll watch it for a little while and then be like, oh, that's exactly the same thing I do, but I do this, right? Or like there's one extra twist in there. And it's like that's super fun, and the stuff you don't get to do in class because it completely derails a class. If I have kind of like a set, itinerary or whatever it is for like syllabus that I'm going to get done in my class, I don't have space sometimes for like one student and I to go off on a geeky deep dive into something I see them doing. But like those evenings are what that is for.
How many times a year do you do retreats?
So I have it really dialed back right now. It's about 3 or 4 times a year that I'm traveling to teach like that in a kind of retreat or guild way. I've also been doing some guild stuff. I do more Zoom teaching now than I ever did before, although I find that surprisingly exhausting because it's so one-sided. Like
Right.
you'd think not a big deal, but it's actually like I'm a little, or you do it late at night and then I'm like wired for hours and I'm supposed to be sleeping. So I'll do some of that. And then I always take a tour or two a year with knitters. So this year I'm taking a group on a cruise for 2 weeks. Last year I had two groups that went to Ireland. The year before that, obviously everything was canceled. This year's been a little crazy because I scheduled this kind of winter and spring thinking that like 72% of my life would be canceled because that seemed like the rubric. It seemed like most shit gets canceled. So let's like overschedule. And it ended up like nothing got.
Everything happened.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, that was too much. And now I've been home. This is the longest I've been home in a while. I've been home for a few weeks and I'm like gardening and it's great. It's awesome.
I mean, when you take people on a tour, does that stress you out because it's so much responsibility on your shoulders for it to go perfectly?
So the last two Ireland trips I did were a little more challenging than they had been before. I mean, I always like have a level of stress, which I think is important because then I'm doing my best, right? And I'm caring about everybody. But it has shifted. Like this post-COVID travel thing is different and it's a little more intense. And I don't hate it, but it's not what it was. And I'm looking forward to this cruise that I'm doing because what's great about a cruise is you're in the same room for the whole time. You're not packing up your bags. You're not worrying about people leaving their iPads and their, hotel room safe and they're 5 hours away or whatever. Like you have a space in a room and there's kind of like more downtime, which is part of what I love about travel.
I wanted to ask you about that, like to come back to the need for food, because what I found lovely about it, not everybody can afford to go to a retreat, not everybody can afford to go on a cruise, but everybody could participate in that event. It was like really all inclusive, like any kind of knitter, any kind of crocheter could like meet together or just go on Zoom and like be part of that community. How important it is for you to have events like this that accessible to all the knitters regardless of their budget?
Really important, actually. And it's part of why. So we had said with Knit for Food, we encourage people to raise $100 per person to get the Zoom link. But we knew from the get-go that everybody was going to get the link, like if they signed up to do it. And then I know the yarn shops were streaming, so people were able to watch that way. What I actually found this year, which was kind of interesting, is there were way more public meetups than ever before because we're kind of in this post-pandemic world. And most of the public meetups, nobody wanted to watch the Zoom because they were all so happy to be together. Like nobody was kind of like I think people stopped and queued in like when World Central Kitchen spoke or like when Lasagna Love, that was like adorable watching the lasagna be made, right? But I know I actually had friends over downstairs and we had it all set up in the living room for people to watch and they were all in the kitchen hanging out and eating and talking. They were all so happy to be together.
So tell me about your day. How did that go? Like what did you do that whole day?
So I'm really glad I had people here this year because in years past it's just been like me and Max at home, kind of like running it, and then And then I'm texting with people in between that. And this one, when I took breaks from being on the Zoom, I was able to go downstairs and be with my friends. And that was really fun. And people were like knitting and making jewelry. There was like some kind, my friend was doing this like Viking wire nail binding insanity. That was very cool. Like it was like my favorite way to see my house, right? Like with my friends in it, all creating and talking and supporting each other. And there was like tons of food and, not a lot of booze.
Time for food?
I was like in breaks, I was like definitely taking, making sure I was sustained so I could run back upstairs and kind of be like on for the next thing. But I actually got like a whole sleeve knit that day. I was thrilled.
Oh, really? That was my next question. Like, did you get any knitting done?
I did. I got one whole sleeve of a sweater done, which felt like a win,
I mean, did you ever expect when you went to Cornell that it wasn't your highest achievement, that you're gonna go so far?
No, at first, like I kind of couldn't believe that I got into Cornell because I wasn't like this, amazing high school student or anything. I really liked I did a lot of drama in high school, a lot of hikes in the woods, if you know what I mean. I wasn't the best little girl ever. And no, I had no idea like where things have ended up. I think the only thing I always knew is that I'd always be creative. Like I'd always be a maker. And that is certainly very true. I still sew, actually. I sew most of my clothing. I'm not a big like clothing buyer. I really enjoy making most of the clothing that I wear. And that happens just like in little waves. It's a little bit more based on what I have time for. And I find lately I sew clothing for a photo shoot. Like I'll design a scarf for a club and be like, oh, this is a good opportunity to like make a tunic. I don't have the right thing in my wardrobe to wear with this. And so that's like a way I can kind of fill in and get some fun sewing time. But yeah, no, I had no idea where life would take me. It's so weird. Or like being on camera so much is like the craziest thing on the planet, right?
Well, I mean, do you feel like you're living your dream? Do you feel like you achieved everything you could have dreamed of? Or do you feel like you're just scratching the surface?
Oh, scratching surface. Totally. Lately I've been playing with beading techniques that are like beading techniques I knew from my teenagehood. So like last night I was up and I was playing with a flat stitch peyote. It was like a flat peyote stitch that I hadn't done probably since I was like 18. And it came back to me. I had to look at one video for like, how do you start? And then all of a sudden my needle just like knew what to do. I will say the beads are bigger now. And I do have progressives, right? Like, so I used to be able to work with teeny tiny little beads, like in a car while it was driving. And now like that, I have to be a little more precious about that. We age.
Sure do. Well, tell me about like everybody who is on my channel. I usually ask about their fabric stash or their yarn stash. You have yarn stash, fabric stash, bead stash. Like, tell me how you keep it all organized.
So that's a good question. So in my office is where most of my like personal yarn stash and then designing yarn stashes. And I have kind of like one of those big cube walls with cubes because I have one cat who likes to reach in to grab things to check them out. So those cubes are kind of like sealed and pushed up so he can't get in there to touch anything. And then that's most of my yarn. And then yarn for clubs and stuff is like in bins or boxes in the studio. And I don't call that stash because it's not mine. I bought it with other people's money. It's not my stash. And then the bead stash, I keep, what's awesome about beads is they're heavy, but they're small, right? So there's just like a few plastic shoe boxes that have my beads and they're organized by size. And then there's always one box that's like other, like that if it's like an interesting shape or a crystal or something like that. And that's exploded lately because then there's like bead stash for kits. And then those that has like bigger boxes, but those have to be pretty sturdy boxes because beads get very heavy very quickly. So they're like a little more structured. And then fabric wise, that is out of control right now. So I've got like, I'm supposed to keep fabric in one Rubbermaid bin and then this one glass wood cabinet that I have. And it's more like in those two things. And then there's a box and then there's a cube and then there's a giant pile on top of it. And one of my really good friends in Trumansburg, my hometown, actually just started a fabric store. And I can just go there and it's like an fabric fabric store, and I could just go to her house. And like the other day I needed something for the necklace I had designed, and I just went over there and bought fabric, but I bought fabric for 3 projects.
Well, when it comes to yarn or to beads,
Yeah.
are you more disciplined of a buyer? Like, do you buy for specific project, or you just go and you see something and you just have to bring it home with you?
So yarn is hard for me because yarn, if I'm using it for a kit, I need to be able to purchase it wholesale. So I've learned to be a little more deliberate with my yarn purchases, like ask, can I get this wholesale? Or if it's something I think wants to be a sweater, I'll always only buy one skein and I'll swatch it. And then I'll see if I like it. And then I'll like go ahead and buy enough. And if I'm like wanting to do kits in my shop, I'll make sure I can get it wholesale to be able to do that. And I end up using a lot of the yarn that I buy for giveaways. So like on my YouTube channel, when I do lives, I'll do a giveaway, or like when I do knit along. So then if I buy something and I don't end up using it, I kind of am like, oh, I'm just buying it for everybody and I'm supporting the yarn dyer at the same time. So when I'm at a retreat, I'll kind of like go around the marketplace and try to buy something from almost everybody, because I know that it becomes my like giveaway budget. We just call that advertising and marketing in the accounting software. And then bead wise, it's very hard to hold up a skein of yarn to a computer screen for a matching color. So what's nice about beads is I can just buy little tubes for color, and I'll have like lots of different tubes for color. And oftentimes it won't even be the right size or shape. It'll just be the right color. And then I'll go ahead and like look online when I'm ready to use it for something and order it. So I don't go too big on bead stash until I know it's something I'm using for something, and then I'll order it in kilos at that point.
Well, it like my experience with yarn buying, I would look at some, like I would buy all this yarn. Like I have some yarn, right? We can tell. But then like a project comes to mind and I'm like, but I don't have that color. And I need to buy color for this yarn. Or I don't have that thickness, so I don't have that texture or whatever, right? That yarn
Yeah.
base. Do you have the same problem with all?
Always. Yeah. And I'll be like, then you go to your husband and you're like, hey, yeah, I need to get the, not that I'm asking permission by any stretch of the imagination, but just in conversation, I'll be like, I got to go buy some yarn because I'm doing a thing. And he's like, you need to buy yarn. Like, are you sure? I was like, well, I did green last time and I have it in green, but I can't knit something else in green. It's got to be purple, because I'm always kind of like trying not to do the same thing again and again. And we all get into ruts with design where it's like green months or purple months or whatever. And I just try to like mix it up a little bit. So yeah, all the time that happens.
What's your approach to design? How does that happen? Like how those ideas come to you?
So if you've watched, it sounds like you watched a few interviews with me to get to know me, so you might know the answer is the shower. So one of my friends gifted me a waterproof notepad and pencil so I can sketch in the shower. So like the places I'll have ideas for designs are like in the shower or at yoga or while I'm hiking, like somewhere where I'm kind of in meditational space. My shower for me is kind of this like sensory chamber, this black box. So I'll kind of sometimes go into the shower with a like, I need to solve this problem, or I need to like have something to do for, countdown calendar next December. What am I going to do? And I'll end up with like drawings all over the shower, tiny bit like somebody on the spectrum. But it always works out really well. And if I hit a design problem, sometimes I'll figure that out in my sleep. Like I'll wake up and be like, oh, maybe I can do that. And sometimes it'll work. And sometimes it totally does. It's like, a dream idea that doesn't work at all.
I mean, how often does that happen? Like, do you usually have an idea and know how to implement it in life?
So yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll do little mini swatches. Oftentimes, like if I have a concept, I'll do some proof of concepts, or I'll do like a little mini sweater to be like, does that work? Does that shaping work? Do I like it? Do I want to, like when I work on advent calendar stuff, I'll do something with like 10-gram bits instead of 100-gram bits to be like, does that shaping work before I like go deep into really knitting something to try it? So I'll do little swatches to try things with lace if I'm looking into lace stitches. I'll just have swatches where I have one lace kind of moving into the next stitch to make sure that things are lining up the way I like them before I do it in like 260 stitches on my needles, because that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Sometimes I'll do it on my needles, like I'll design a part of something and then I'll be at the next part, and then I'll swatch over 20 or 40 stitches that are on my needles, see if something works, and then rip it back to a lifeline, and then, do that next step once I'm sure I like it. And that lets me figure out yarn usage as well. So if I'm like, oh, I like that, but is it going to use more yarn than I have on a skein? Right. That swatching helps a lot.
Are you ever out of ideas?
Not yet. So I had a problem. And it wasn't really a problem because it worked out beautifully, but for Chillo collar, which you have in that purple envelope, I had knit for food in March, and I had sent out the March Lola's Choice kit, which is by bimonthly kit club. And I knew I needed a May kit, and I had a design in mind, but I didn't even have the energy to like go deep to work on it. And then during Knit for Food, I was like, I got 32 days left to get this thing out the door for Lola's Choice. And I had designed this color, but I didn't like it. I didn't like the yarn. It wasn't like as exciting as I wanted it to be. I wasn't sure about the pendant I originally had. And then I went to H&H in Germany with my buddy Patty Lyons, and which was kind of an insane thing to do, but I needed to see new so badly. And I ended up finding Valdani embroidery floss was there, because that show was like half sewing and half knitting. And they had a size 5 pearl cotton that's like perfect for designing and knitting jewelry with. And they're awesome. Their yarns are dyed in Romania, and they're from Canada. And they were able to get me like cones of this yarn in the color I wanted, like within 3 weeks. It was amazing. It got me. And so I found something that like made me go from like, to just like over the moon excited. So sometimes that's what I was saying earlier about like leaving space for the magic, right? If I was so overly planned, then having the space to like find something amazing and just go for it wouldn't be able to happen. But that was cutting it closer than I enjoy. So.
Well, you're friends with a lot of designers, a lot of other people, instructors. Does that ever stress you out? Do you ever compare yourself to them and to like their successful pattern sales, where like you're having a moment when your pattern doesn't sell as much as you hope for? Like, is it hard to be surrounded by successful people in the industry?
So no, I think we all lift each other up. And I think if you look closely, and I know this from doing this for a while, we all do something different. Like everybody's got, I just actually was chatting with my friend Carol Feller, and we both do video classes. We both teach through video. We have a completely different way of shooting our video and editing our video. And it works for both of us beautifully. And we're both like, with what we do, it is fitting both of us great, right? So I've learned, and like Patty and I do the same thing, but also completely do a different thing. Like she doesn't kind of do the kit thing that I do. She leans much more into teaching, which is awesome, and she's so freaking good at it. So I think we all find the places that we shine and then support each other. I've let go of like, I don't know, liking or counting things on Instagram, because that's just like a fake world that, who knows what the algorithm has decided, whose right. light it should shine on in the moment. And it's not real life, and it doesn't represent sales. And what I know for me is that as a designer, if I didn't have the kits and clubs and merchandising and other things that I do, pattern sales alone would not be working as a like financially viable business. So I don't think there's many designers who can manage to just do PDF sales, which I'm sure you've heard before as well.
And it's also like there are people who trying to sell their finished products, and it's also, it's like what your mom taught you at the early age, that there is a cost to that, right? And there is hours involved and all of these things. So it's with the pattern, it's the same thing. It takes so long to write the pattern, to edit, to tech edit, to test, to put it together,
to market. Like that's its own, like you're all done. And, you know, by the time it's time to do marketing, I'm done. I'm like on to knitting the next thing. But that marketing piece is really important. And I found for marketing that I like teaching. Like I'll teach a piece of the pattern that I'm excited to share. What I think is the hardest thing to market is stuff that's already been out there for a while, like something new that I haven't shared yet. So that's where I, you know, sometimes put some thought, like how could I share that thing without feeling like I'm like shoving it down somebody's throat, but like reminding them that there's 300 patterns to choose from. Like I have a big, you know, catalog of patterns to knit for sure.
Right. Well, when you decide on the next pattern, do you look on Ravelry, like what's popular, what's hot right now to get ideas for that? Or do you go by seasons or what you just done? How do you decide?
Right. So I try not to go with the hot right now thing because if I was going with that, by the time I got the thing done, it wouldn't be hot anymore. Right. It takes like, it's a good 3 or 4 month turnaround from like concept to like getting something out in the world. I would say like the bling tee, which I'm wearing right now, which is a new pattern that is just coming out quite soon. I think it's around June 15th that it's going to release. I did a tank top called Bling Tank last summer. It was like in June of last year. And everybody asked me for a t-shirt version because they wanted to like kind of have some coverage up here. And so, you know, it took me a year to get around to it. Took a little time to make happen, but certainly, you know, it was on the list of things to do. So that was me kind of riffing off of myself. And then Lola sweater, which I released at the end of March. And then it is actually not available right now, and it'll be available again at the end of August. That sweater used the same stitch that I had like in a shawl and mittens for patterns that came out last November. And when I did that stitch and used that yarn, I was like, oh, that so wants to be a yoke sweater. I'm very excited to design this as a yoke sweater. So I kind of like am riffing off myself basically. And it's always based on what I want to wear. Like I didn't actually really know I wanted a t-shirt. I've worn this thing so much already. Like I absolutely adore it. And I've been going back and looking at all of my summer sweaters, of which I have a lot. I have like 10 or 12 summer sweater patterns and kind of enjoying them all as I like at every season. I'm kind of like, how do you like breathe fresh life into these things, right?
Do you ever knit other people patterns?
I do. Totally do. So yeah, I would say at least once a year, if not twice a year, I'll find something else of somebody else's to knit. I am currently looking at things I'm going to knit for the cruise. And last night I bought a pair of these amazing slippers by Kristen Drysdale. She's Scandiworks. And someone had knit me a pair of these slippers like 2 years ago. And I'm so excited to knit them. I looked at the pattern, they're all knit flat, like the heel and the bottom of the foot is knit flat, and then you join into the round for the rest of the foot. Have you seen her slippers?
I did. I did. I knitted similar ones from somebody else. Allison
Okay.
had like similar design. The
Yeah, really
construction is
cool.
the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, I think I'm gonna knit those for everybody who, if they want to like knit them on the cruise, because we're going to a mill that has yarn that's like perfect Norwegian slipper yarn. And then there is like a colorwork yoke sweater I've been obsessed with for years by Lincoln Newman called Hopi. And that is like totally on my list to knit one day. I might have to retire first, but I'll get the yarn.
That's stressful to like pack for festivals or for retreats or for cruise because it's sort of like a fashion show.
It is. Yeah, but it's almost easier. Like as I'm packing for something like that, I'll lay out outfits, and then I'm pretty good at being like, okay, you can go with that and you can go with that and you can go with that. It's kind of like fun to do, kind of plan it out. I used to use a spreadsheet. Like when I was doing TNNA, I would totally be worried I'd forget to pack something, and then also not want to be like stressed out about what I was wearing. I would like definitely go ahead and set it up on a spreadsheet and then like pack it and then just know what I was wearing. And now I go I'm not quite so like that anymore, you know.
It's so funny. You just moved a little closer and suddenly all the beads.
Oh, did they? Yeah.
Love that. Well, I hope
I
I'm
designed this with a like a round boat neck, and then the pattern's also written to close in, to not have the neck not be so wide. And I keep noticing that my bra strap is showing because I should have worn a tank top underneath it for the boat neck, you know? So that's why I keep moving, is like, I'm like covering it up. So to wear a tank top next time.
Well, I'm planning to go and play with my kids.
Oh, have fun.
I'll keep you posted on what I create with them. And guys, like, we matching the bracelets.
Oh yeah, we're matching bracelets. You could probably move your rivet one tighter so it's hanging a little tighter, but
yeah, I'll still play with it. Yeah. It's like took me a bit to figure out how to secure it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being my guest again. I loved having you on. Thank you. Thank you.